The dust settled around her worn boots like a shroud, as Rose Jenkins stood alone on a stretch of cracked earth that her brother swore was a train station, though nothing but sagebrush and broken dreams marked the spot where he had left her 3 hours ago. She shifted her weight, feeling the August heat of 1882 seep through the thin soles of her traveling shoes, her eyes scanning the endless Texas horizon for any sign of the railway platform Thomas had promised would be here. Her older brother had been so certain, so insistent, that this was where she needed to wait for the westbound train that would take her to their aunt in El Paso. He had kissed her forehead, pressed 2 silver dollars into her palm, and ridden off with a speed that should have warned her something was wrong. But Rose had trusted him, the way she always had since their parents died of fever 2 years back, the way she had trusted him when he said they would make a new life together in Texas after leaving Missouri. The sun was beginning its slow descent toward the distant mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and rust. Rose's throat felt dry as sand, and the canteen Thomas had left her was nearly empty. She took a small sip, rationing the water the way she had learned to ration everything in her 20 years of life. Her dark hair clung to her neck beneath her bonnet, and her simple gray traveling dress was coated in a fine layer of dust that made her look like a ghost standing in the middle of nowhere. A sound broke through the silence, not the whistle of a train, but the steady rhythm of hoofbeats approaching from the east. Rose's heart quickened with a mixture of hope and fear. Out here, alone, a woman was vulnerable in ways that made her stomach clench. She straightened her spine anyway, refusing to show weakness even if terror was threading through her veins. The rider came into view, a silhouette against the dying light. As he drew closer, Rose could make out more details. He sat tall in the saddle, his broad-brimmed hat shading a face she could not yet see clearly. He wore the practical clothing of a working cowboy, dark trousers and a worn shirt, a bandana tied loosely around his neck. His horse was a sturdy roan that looked well cared for, and a bedroll was tied behind the saddle along with saddlebags that suggested a man accustomed to long rides. He slowed as he approached, and Rose saw his hand rest near the revolver at his hip, not threatening but cautious. She supposed they were both being careful, 2 strangers meeting in the middle of emptiness. "Madam," he said, his voice a low drawl that carried clearly in the still air. He was younger than she had first thought, perhaps 25, with sun-bronzed skin and sharp features that spoke of hard living. His eyes, she noticed, were a startling shade of blue-gray, like storm clouds gathering over the prairie. "You lost?" "No," Rose said automatically, then felt foolish. "I mean, I am waiting for the train. My brother left me here at the station." The cowboy looked around slowly, making a show of surveying the empty landscape. When his eyes returned to her, there was something like pity in them that made Rose's cheeks burn with humiliation. "Madam, there is no station here. Nearest rail line is 30 miles west outside Shafter. This here is just open range." The words hit her like a physical blow. Rose felt her knees weaken, but she locked them, refusing to crumble. "That cannot be right. My brother Thomas, he said this was where the westbound train would come. He was very specific." The cowboy dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots hitting the ground with a soft thud. Up close, he was taller than Rose had realized, and she had to tilt her head back slightly to meet his eyes. There was concern there now, mixed with something harder. "How long have you been standing here?" 3 hours, maybe closer to 4 now." Rose's voice sounded small even to her own ears. "He said he had business in town, that he would meet me in El Paso at our aunt's house." "Which town?" "I do not know. He did not say." The cowboy was quiet for a moment, and in that silence Rose felt the full weight of her situation crash over her. Thomas had abandoned her, her own brother. The only family she had left in the world had left her in the middle of nowhere with no water, no shelter, and no way to survive. The why of it did not matter as much as the brutal reality. She was alone. "My name is Tucker Dalton," the cowboy said, his voice gentler now. I work cattle for the Double R Ranch, about 15 miles north of here. I've been riding fence lines all week, heading back now. You cannot stay here, miss. Night comes fast and it gets cold. There are also coyotes, and worse. Worse? Rose whispered. Men who would not treat a woman alone with any kind of respect. Tucker's jaw tightened. Begging your pardon for speaking plain, but you need to understand the danger. Rose did understand. She had heard enough stories, seen enough of the world's cruelty. What do you suggest I do? Tucker seemed to be thinking, his eyes never leaving her face. Shafter is not much, but it has a boarding house run by a decent woman named Mrs. Kowalski. She might have a room, and she definitely will not let any harm come to you while you are under her roof. I can take you there, help you figure out what to do next. I have $2, Rose said, lifting her chin. I can pay for my board. That is good, that will help. Tucker walked back to his horse and untied his canteen. He returned and handed it to her. Drink. You look like you're about to fall over. The water was warm, but tasted like salvation. Rose drank deeply, then forced herself to stop and hand it back. Thank you, Mr. Dalton. Tucker is fine. He studied her for another moment. I am going to be straight with you, miss. I do not know why your brother left you here, but men do not do that kind of thing unless they have a powerful reason. Might be he is in trouble. Might be he is the trouble. Either way, you are better off not counting on him coming back. The words stung because they were true. Rose had felt it in the way Thomas had been acting for weeks, ever since they crossed into Texas. He had been nervous. Looking over his shoulder, making strange decisions, she had chalked it up to the stress of starting over, but now she wondered what secrets he had been carrying. I understand, she said quietly. Tucker nodded. Can you ride? Yes, though it has been a while. We will go slow. My horse can carry both of us to Shafter. It is not far, maybe an hour if we do not push too hard. He glanced at the sky. We should leave now, though. Do not want to be out here after full dark. Rose gathered her small carpet bag, which contained all her worldly possessions, a few changes of clothes, her mother's Bible, and a daguerreotype of her parents taken years ago. Tucker helped her onto his horse, then swung up behind her. She stiffened at the closeness, feeling the solid warmth of his chest against her back, his arms coming around her to hold the reins. You all right? He asked, his breath stirring the loose strands of hair near her ear. Yes, Rose managed, though her heart was beating too fast. They rode in silence for a while, the roan settling into a steady walk that ate up the miles. Rose watched the landscape change subtly as they traveled, the flat scrubland giving way to gentle rises and the occasional cluster of mesquite trees. The air cooled as the sun sank lower, and she found herself grateful for Tucker's warmth at her back. Where are you from originally? Tucker asked after a long stretch of quiet. Missouri? A small town called Liberty. My parents had a farm there, nothing grand, but it was home. Rose surprised herself by continuing. They died of fever 2 years back, both within a week of each other. Thomas and I tried to keep the farm going, but the bank wanted money we did not have. We lost it 6 months ago. I am sorry, Tucker said, and he sounded like he meant it. That is a hard thing to lose. Where are you from? Here and there. My father was a gambler. Dragged my mother and me from one town to another until she died when I was 12. He left me with a rancher in New Mexico, said he would be back in a month. That was 13 years ago. Tucker's voice was matter of fact, as if he was recounting someone else's story. The rancher taught me cattle work, treated me decent. When he died, I moved on, worked different places, ended up at the Double R about a year back. Do you like it there? It is honest work. The foreman is fair, and the pay is regular. I have been thinking about saving enough to buy my own land someday, run my own herd, but that is a long way off. Rose could hear the yearning beneath his casual words, the same hunger for something permanent that she felt in her own chest. They were both drifters in their own way, both looking for a place to belong. There, Tucker said, pointing ahead, that is Shafter. The town materialized out of the twilight like a mirage. It was small, maybe a dozen buildings lining a single main street, but after hours of emptiness it looked like civilization itself. Rose could see lamplight glowing in windows, hear the faint sound of a piano playing somewhere. Her body sagged with relief. Tucker guided his horse toward a 2-story building near the center of town. A hand-painted sign declared it to be Kowalski's boarding house, clean rooms, fair prices. He dismounted first, then reached up to help Rose down. His hands on her waist were firm but respectful, and he released her the moment her feet touched the ground. "Wait here," he said. "Let me see if Mrs. Kowalski is in." He disappeared inside, leaving Rose standing in the street with her carpet bag. She became aware of eyes on her, a few men loitering outside what appeared to be a saloon across the way. Their stares made her skin crawl, and she kept her gaze fixed on the boarding house door. Tucker emerged a moment later with a stout woman in her 50s, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. She had the look of someone who did not suffer fools, but her eyes softened when they landed on Rose. "Lord have mercy, child. You look half dead on your feet," Mrs. Kowalski said in an accent that spoke of European origins. "Tucker says your brother left you in the middle of nowhere. Is this true?" "Yes, madam," Rose said. "Men," Mrs. Kowalski muttered darkly. "Come inside. I have a room on the 2nd floor, small but clean. $1 a week, includes breakfast and supper. You pay as you go, no credit." "That is more than fair, thank you." Rose followed the older woman inside, glancing back to see Tucker still standing in the street, his hat in his hands. "Mr. Dalton," she called, "thank you for your help. I do not know what would have happened if you had not come along." "Glad I could help, Miss Jenkins. You take care now." He started to turn away. "Will you be staying in town tonight?" Rose asked, surprising herself. Tucker paused. "I was planning to ride back to the ranch." "It will be full dark soon," Mrs. Kowalski interjected. "Tucker Dalton, you know better than to ride these roads at night. Men get robbed, horses step in holes and break legs. You stay in town, get a fresh start in the morning." "I do not have money for a room, Mrs. K." "Then you sleep in my barn, same as always. There is fresh hay and it is warm enough. But first, you both come into my kitchen. I have stew left from supper, and you look like you could use a meal." Rose realized she was starving, had not eaten since the stale biscuit Thomas had given her that morning. Her stomach growled audibly, making Tucker's mouth quirk in an almost smile. "I guess that settles it," he said. Mrs. Kowalski's kitchen was warm and fragrant with the smell of beef and vegetables. She ladled generous portions into thick ceramic bowls and set them on a scrubbed wooden table along with a basket of bread. Rose tried to eat slowly, to maintain some dignity, but the food was so good she nearly wept. Across from her, Tucker ate with the efficient motions of a working man, but his eyes kept drifting to her face. "So what is your plan, Miss Jenkins? D'abord?" Mrs. Kowalski asked, settling into a chair with a cup of coffee. "I do not know yet," Rose admitted. "My brother said we were going to our aunt's house in El Paso. I have an address, but I do not have money for train fare, and I am not even certain she is expecting me." "Can you write her a letter?" "I suppose so, if I can find paper and postage." "I have both. You write your letter tonight, and I will see it gets on tomorrow's mail coach. Meanwhile, you need work if you're going to stay in Shafter. Can you cook, clean, sew?" "I can do all three. I ran my father's household after my mother died." Mrs. Kowalski nodded approvingly. "I could use help here at the boarding house. I'm not as young as I used to be and the work is getting hard. I can pay you 50 cents a week plus room and board. It is not much, but it will keep you fed and housed while you figure things out." 50 cents a week was barely anything, but it was more than Rose had a right to expect. "I accept, and I am grateful for the opportunity." "Good. You start tomorrow after breakfast. Now finish eating and go to bed. You look exhausted." Rose's room was indeed small, barely large enough for a narrow bed, a washstand, and a trunk for her belongings. But the sheets were clean, and the mattress was softer than the wagon bed she had slept on for weeks while traveling west. She washed her face and hands in the basin, then sat down to compose a letter to her aunt by candlelight. The words came slowly. How did she explain that Thomas had abandoned her? How did she ask for help without sounding desperate? In the end, she kept it simple, explaining that they had been separated during travel and asking if Thomas had arrived. She provided Mrs. Kowalski's address and asked her aunt to write back as soon as possible. Sleep should have come easily after such a long, terrible day, but Rose found herself lying awake, staring at the ceiling. She kept replaying the moment when she had realized Thomas was not coming back, the gut-wrenching understanding that she truly was alone. Tears finally came then, hot and bitter, soaking into her pillow as she grieved not just for her brother's betrayal but for everything she had lost: her parents, her home, her sense of safety in the world. Morning came too soon, announced by roosters and the sounds of the town waking up. Rose washed and dressed in her other traveling dress, a faded blue cotton that had seen better days. She made her way downstairs to find Mrs. Kowalski already in the kitchen, kneading dough for bread. "Good, you're up," the older woman said. "There are 4 guests staying here right now, all men who work at the mine outside town. They will want breakfast soon. You can start by setting the table in the dining room, 8 places. Then come back, and I will show you how I like things done." Rose threw herself into the work, grateful to have something to occupy her hands and mind. She set the table with mismatched plates and cutlery, then returned to help Mrs. Kowalski fry eggs and bacon. The guests arrived in a cluster, rough-looking men in their 30s and 40s who nodded politely to Rose but did not speak to her directly. She served them silently, refilling coffee cups and clearing plates. As the last miner was leaving, Tucker appeared in the doorway. He had cleaned up somewhat, though his clothes were the same, and his hair was still damp from washing. He held his hat in his hands again, turning it nervously. "Morning, Mrs. K, Miss Jenkins. I wanted to check on you before I headed back to the ranch." "I am well, thank you," Rose said. "Mrs. Kowalski has kindly offered me employment." "That is good news." Tucker looked relieved. "I am glad you have a safe place to stay." "Would you like breakfast, Tucker?" Mrs. Kowalski asked. "We have plenty." "I do not want to impose." "Sit down before I box your ears. You helped this girl when she needed it. The least I can do is feed you." Tucker sat, and Rose served him a plate piled high with food. He ate with obvious enjoyment, and she found herself watching the way his hands moved, scarred and calloused from hard work but strangely graceful. When he caught her looking, she quickly turned away, feeling her cheeks heat. "When do you think you will be back in Shafter?" Mrs. Kowalski asked Tucker. "Probably not for a few weeks. We are moving cattle to summer pasture, and that takes time." "Well, when you do come back, you stop by. I will want to hear how things are going at the Double R." Tucker promised he would, then stood to leave. At the door, he paused and looked back at Rose. "Miss Jenkins, I hope things work out for you. You seem like you have had more than your share of hard luck." "Thank you, Mr. Dalton. Tucker. I will not forget what you did for me." He nodded once, settled his hat on his head, and walked out into the morning sunlight. Rose watched through the window as he mounted his roan and rode north out of town, a solitary figure against the vast Texas sky. She felt an unexpected pang of loss, which was ridiculous. She barely knew the man. The days fell into a rhythm after that. Rose worked from dawn until evening, cleaning rooms, doing laundry, helping with meals. Mrs. Kowalski was a demanding employer, but not an unkind one, and she seemed to take satisfaction in teaching Rose the particulars of running a boarding house. In the evenings, Rose would sit in her room and read from her mother's Bible, or sometimes Mrs. Kowalski would invite her to sit in the parlor and they would talk about their lives. Rose learned that Mrs. Kowalski had come to America from Poland as a young bride following a husband who had promised her a better life. He had died in a mining accident after only 3 years of marriage, leaving her with nothing but debts. She had worked as a cook, a laundress, and finally saved enough to buy the boarding house. She had been running it for 15 years now, alone and fiercely independent. The secret to surviving is not needing anyone. Mrs. Kowalski told Rose one evening as they shelled peas on the front porch, "Men will let you down every time. Better to rely on yourself." "Is that why you never remarried?" Partly, mostly because I like my life the way it is. I answer to no one, spend my money as I please, go to bed when I want. Why would I give that up? Rose could not argue with the logic, but something in her resisted it. She did not want to become hard, did not want to close herself off to the possibility of connection. Still, after Thomas's betrayal, she understood the appeal of self-sufficiency. 2 weeks after she arrived in Shafter, a letter came. Mrs. Kowalski brought it up to Rose's room, her expression grave. Rose recognized her aunt's handwriting on the envelope and tore it open with trembling fingers. The letter was brief and devastating. Her aunt wrote that Thomas had indeed arrived in El Paso, had stayed for 2 days, and then left abruptly in the middle of the night, taking a silver tea set and a considerable sum of money that had been hidden in the house. The aunt was furious and had contacted the local sheriff. She made it clear that Rose was not welcome in her home, as she could not trust that the girl was not part of her brother's criminal scheme. Rose read the letter 3 times, each word feeling like a knife wound. Thomas was a thief. Worse, he had stolen from family, and in doing so, he had tainted Rose by association. Her aunt believed she might have been complicit. The injustice of it made her want to scream. "Bad news?" Mrs. Kowalski asked gently. "The worst." Rose handed over the letter, too numb to care about privacy. The older woman read it quickly, then let out a string of words in Polish that Rose suspected were profanities. "This is not your fault. You understand that, yes?" "My aunt does not seem to think so." "Your aunt is a fool. You were abandoned in the desert while your brother was robbing her. Obviously, you were not working together." Mrs. Kowalski sat down on the edge of Rose's bed. "I know this is hard, but perhaps it is for the best. Now you know the truth about your brother. He is not a good man, and you are better off without him." "He's all the family I have." "No, he is not. Family is not just blood. Family is the people who stand by you, who help you when you need it. Your brother is not your family anymore." Rose wanted to argue, but she could not find the words. Deep down, she knew Mrs. Kowalski was right. Thomas had shown his true nature, and clinging to the fantasy of what he should have been would only hurt her. "What do I do now?" Rose whispered. "You keep going. You work. You save your money. You build a life here. Shafter is not much, but it is honest. You can make a place for yourself." "I do not know if I can." "You can. You are stronger than you think, Rose Jenkins. I have seen it in how you work, how you hold yourself together, even when I know you want to fall apart. You have spine. Use it." The words were harsh, but somehow comforting. Rose nodded, wiping her eyes. "Thank you, Mrs. Kowalski." "Call me Helena. If we are going to be family, you should use my name." That simple statement broke something open in Rose's chest, and she found herself hugging the older woman fiercely. Helena patted her back awkwardly but did not pull away. Summer deepened into September, and Rose slowly began to feel less like a refugee and more like a resident of Shafter. She learned the rhythms of the town, the characters who populated it. There was Mr. Chen, who ran the general store, always polite and willing to extend small amounts of credit to those who needed it. There was Reverend Matthews, who preached at the small church every Sunday with more enthusiasm than eloquence. There was Doc Harrison, who smelled like whiskey and was missing 2 fingers on his left hand but could set a broken bone or deliver a baby with equal skill. Rose also became aware of the darker elements. The saloon was a source of constant trouble, drunken brawls spilling into the street most Saturday nights. There were tensions between the Anglo ranchers and the Mexican families who had been in the area far longer. Invisible lines drawn that everyone understood but no one spoke of directly. There were whispers of Comanche raids further north, though no one seemed particularly worried about them reaching Shafter. Through it all, Rose worked and saved her pennies, building up a small reserve of money in a tin box she kept under her floorboards. She tried not to think about Tucker Dalton, but he had a habit of appearing in her thoughts at odd moments, usually late at night when sleep eluded her. She remembered the way he had looked at her with concern rather than judgment, the solid warmth of his presence, the gentle manner in which he had treated her. It was foolish to think about him. He was probably back at his ranch, busy with cattle and the 100 tasks that occupied a cowboy's life. He had likely forgotten her the moment he rode out of town, so it came as a complete shock when, 6 weeks after their first meeting, Tucker Dalton walked into Mrs. Kowalski's dining room at breakfast time. Rose was serving coffee to a table of miners when she heard Helena say, "Tucker Dalton, as I live and breathe, what brings you to town?" Rose turned so fast she nearly spilled the coffee pot. Tucker stood in the doorway, hat in hand, looking tired and dusty from hard riding. But when his eyes found her across the room, his whole face changed, softening into something like relief. "Morning, Mrs. K. I was hoping I might get some breakfast and maybe a word with Miss Jenkins if she has time." "Sit down. I will get you food. Rose, talk to the man before he wears a hole in my floor with his fidgeting." Rose set down the coffee pot with shaking hands and walked over to where Tucker had settled at a corner table. Up close, she could see he had lost weight, and there were new lines of fatigue around his eyes. "Hello," she managed. "Hello?" Tucker gestured to the chair across from him. "Will you sit? I promise this will only take a minute." Rose sat, intensely aware of the curious looks from the miners. "Is everything all right? You look like you have been through something difficult." "Cattle drive got complicated. Lost some animals crossing a river. Then we had trouble with rustlers. But that is not why I am here." Tucker leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "I have been thinking about you. A lot. Probably more than I should have." Rose's heart began to beat faster. "Oh?" "I kept wondering if you were all right, if you had heard from your brother, if you had a plan. I told myself it was none of my business, that I had done my good deed and should leave it at that, but I could not stop thinking about you." He ran a hand through his hair, looking frustrated. "I am not saying this right." "You're doing fine," Rose said softly. "I wanted to come check on you, to see if you needed anything, to make sure you were safe and settled." He met her eyes directly. "And maybe to see if you remembered me at all." "I remember you, Tucker. I have thought about you too." The admission seemed to surprise him. "You have?" "Every day. You saved my life, or at least you saved me from a terrible situation. That is not something a person forgets." "I did not do it looking for thanks." "I know. That makes it even more meaningful." Helena arrived with a heaping plate of eggs, bacon, and biscuits. Breaking the intensity of the moment, she set it in front of Tucker with a knowing look. "Eat, boy. You look like you have been living on jerky and hardtack." Tucker obeyed, and Rose found herself staying at the table, refilling his coffee cup and telling him about the past 6 weeks. She explained about her aunt's letter, about Thomas's theft, about her decision to stay in Shafter and make a life for herself. "I'm sorry about your brother," Tucker said when she finished. "That is a hard betrayal." "I have made my peace with it, or I am trying to anyway." Rose traced a pattern on the worn tablecloth. "Helena says family is not just blood. It is the people who stand by you." "She is right about that. The men I work with at the Double R, they are more brothers to me than my father ever was." Tucker finished his breakfast and pushed the plate away. "Rose, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." "All right." "Do you plan to stay in Shafter permanently?" "I do not know. I have nowhere else to go, and Helena has been good to me. Why do you ask?" Tucker took a deep breath. "Because I would like to come calling on you properly, if you are amenable to that. I know we do not know each other well, but I would like to change that." Rose stared at him, her mind racing. A man was asking to court her, and not just any man, but Tucker Dalton, who had shown her kindness when she needed it most. Her first instinct was to say yes immediately, but caution made her pause. "Tucker, I have to be honest with you as well. I have nothing to offer, no dowry, no prospects, a criminal for a brother. I am working as a maid in a boarding house, living hand to mouth. You could do much better." "I do not want better. I want you." The words were simple and direct, and they hit Rose with the force of a runaway horse. "I am not a rich man, Rose. I work cattle for wages and sleep in a bunkhouse with 7 other men, but I am honest and I work hard, and I think we could build something good together. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you have courage. Standing out there in the desert waiting when a weaker woman would have fallen apart. I know you have dignity, taking work, and making your own way instead of begging or turning to less honest means. I know you have kindness. The way you treat Helena and the way you spoke about your parents. Tucker reached across the table and very gently took her hand. I know that I have not been able to get your face out of my mind for 6 weeks, and that has to mean something. Rose looked down at their joined hands, his so much larger and darker from sun exposure, scarred from rope and leather. She thought about Helena's words, that the secret to surviving was not needing anyone. But Rose did not want to just survive. She wanted to live, to feel, to take risks, even if they might lead to pain. Yes, she said, you may call on me. Tucker's smile transformed his entire face, making him look years younger. Yeah? Yes. But Tucker, I need time. I need to get to know you properly before we make any decisions about the future. Can you accept that? I can. I am not going anywhere, Rose. I will wait as long as you need. Over the following months, Tucker became a regular presence in Shafter. He would ride in on Sundays, his one day off, and he and Rose would walk through the town together talking for hours about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up rootless, about learning to read from a rancher's wife who took pity on him, about his dream of owning land. She told him about her childhood in Missouri, about her mother's garden and her father's quiet strength, about the pain of watching them die and being powerless to stop it. They attended church services together, sitting side by side on the hard wooden pews while Reverend Matthews preached about redemption and forgiveness. They had Sunday dinner at Helena's table, the older woman watching them with sharp eyes but saying nothing. They walked along the creek outside town, and Tucker taught Rose to identify different bird calls and showed her where wild plums grew. Slowly, carefully, they built something real. Rose found herself looking forward to Sundays with an intensity that both thrilled and frightened her. When Tucker rode into town, her whole world seemed to brighten. When he left, she counted the days until his return. Helena noticed, of course. One evening in late October, as Rose was washing dishes, the older woman said, "You are falling in love with him." It was not a question. Rose considered denying it, but could not bring herself to lie. "I think I might be. He is a good man. Not many of those around. But Rose, you need to be sure. Love is not just a feeling. It is a choice you make every day. To put someone else's welfare alongside your own. It is work, hard work. Are you ready for that?" "I do not know," Rose admitted. "Part of me wants to run toward him with both arms open. Part of me wants to run away before I get hurt. That is normal. We have both been betrayed by men we trusted. That leaves scars." Helena dried a plate thoughtfully. "But you cannot let fear rule your life. If you do, you will wake up one day old and alone, wondering what might have been." "I thought you said the secret to surviving was not needing anyone." "I said that was the secret to surviving. I did not say it was the secret to happiness." Helena's voice was soft, almost wistful. "I chose safety over risk, and most days I do not regret it, but sometimes, late at night, I wonder what my life might have looked like if I had been braver." The conversation stayed with Rose. She thought about it during her work, during her prayers, during the long nights when sleep would not come. She thought about Thomas's betrayal and how it had made her afraid to trust. She thought about her parents' marriage, the quiet devotion they had shown each other even in hard times. She thought about Tucker's steady presence, the way he looked at her like she was something precious. In November, Tucker arrived in Shafter with news. "The foreman at the Double R is retiring," he told Rose as they sat on Helena's front porch, wrapped in coats against the chill. "The owner offered me the position." "Tucker, that is wonderful. You must be so pleased." "I am. It comes with better pay and a small house instead of the bunkhouse. It is not much, just 2 rooms and a kitchen, but it is mine." He turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "Rose, I know we have been taking things slow, and I respect that. But I need to know if there is a future for us, because if there is, I want to start building it. I want to make that little house into a home, our home. Rose's breath caught. Are you asking me to marry you? I am. I know I should do this more formally, maybe buy a ring, but I do not want to wait. Rose Jenkins, I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you see the good in the world even after everything you have been through. I want to spend my life with you building something permanent and good. Will you marry me? The words Rose had been holding back for weeks tumbled out. I love you too, Tucker. I think I have loved you since the moment you stopped to help me in the desert. You saw me at my lowest point and treated me with respect and dignity. You have been patient and kind and constant. Yes, I will marry you. Tucker let out a breath that was almost a laugh and pulled her into his arms. Rose buried her face in his shoulder, feeling tears of joy and relief spill over. They held each other as the November wind rattled the porch boards, two people who had been lost finding home in each other. Helena was predictably practical when they told her. Good. You will make a fine pair. When is the wedding? We have not discussed that yet, Rose said. Make it soon. No point in waiting when you have both already decided. You can have the ceremony here if you like, in my parlor. It is small, but we can fit a few people. Are you sure? Tucker asked. Of course. Rose is family now, which means you are too by extension. Helena waved away their thanks. Besides, I have always liked a wedding. Gives me an excuse to bake a proper cake. They chose a date 3 weeks away, the first Saturday in December. It was a scramble to prepare. Rose used some of her saved money to buy fabric from Mr. Chen's store, a simple cream cotton that Helena helped her sew into a dress. Tucker bought her a thin gold band from a jeweler in Fort Davis, making a special trip on his day off. Reverend Matthews agreed to perform the ceremony, and they invited the few people they had grown close to, Helena, of course, and Mr. Chen, and Doc Harrison, and some of the men Tucker worked with at the Double R. The morning of the wedding, Rose woke before dawn, too nervous to sleep. She dressed carefully in her new dress, and Helena helped her arrange her hair, pinning it up and leaving a few soft curls to frame her face. Looking at herself in the small mirror, Rose barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked happy, she realized. Despite everything she had been through, despite all she had lost, she looked genuinely happy. The ceremony was brief and heartfelt. Tucker wore his best shirt and a new string tie, and his hands trembled slightly when he slipped the ring onto Rose's finger. She spoke her vows in a clear, strong voice, promising to love and honor him all the days of her life. When Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, Tucker kissed her gently, and the small gathering erupted in applause. Helena had outdone herself with the food, preparing a feast that included roasted chicken, biscuits, greens, and a beautiful cake with white frosting. They ate and talked and celebrated until evening, and then Tucker and Rose climbed into a borrowed wagon for the ride to the Double R. The ranch was 15 miles north of Shafter, situated in a valley between low hills. Even in the darkness, Rose could sense the space around them, the bigness of the land. The house Tucker had described was indeed small, but when he lit a lamp, Rose saw that he had made efforts to prepare it for her. The floors were swept clean, the windows washed, and there was wood stacked by the fireplace. A simple bed frame held a new mattress, and Tucker had even hung curtains, though they were clearly the work of a man unused to such tasks. It is not much, Tucker said, setting down Rose's carpetbag, but it is ours. It is perfect, Rose said honestly. It is the first place that has felt like mine since I lost my parents' farm. That night, they came together as husband and wife, tentatively at first, learning each other's bodies and rhythms. Rose had been nervous, her limited knowledge coming from whispered conversations with married women and her mother's vague advice years ago. But Tucker was patient and gentle, and there was something profound in the intimacy they shared, a vulnerability that bound them together in ways words could not capture. Afterward, lying in the darkness with Tucker's arm around her, Rose felt a peace she had not experienced in years. She had a home again, Not just a place to sleep, but a true home with a partner who loved her. The journey from that terrible day in the desert to this moment had been hard, but it had led her here, and she would not change it. Life at the Double R was different from anything Rose had experienced. As the foreman's wife, she had a unique position in the ranch hierarchy. She was not expected to work like the ranch hands, but she quickly found ways to make herself useful. She cooked meals for the crew during busy times like branding and roundup. She tended a garden, growing vegetables that supplemented their diet. She learned to preserve food, putting up jars of pickles and tomatoes and peaches when the peddler came through. Tucker thrived in his new role as foreman. He had a natural gift for managing men and livestock, and the owner, Mr. Garrett, expressed his satisfaction regularly. The work was hard and the days were long, but Tucker came home to Rose every evening, and that made everything bearable. Their first year of marriage passed in a blur of work and learning and deepening love. They had their disagreements, of course. Rose thought Tucker was too lenient with ranch hands who shirked their duties. Tucker thought Rose worked too hard, exhausting herself in her efforts to prove her worth. But they learned to talk through their conflicts, to compromise, to put their partnership above their individual stubbornness. In the spring of 1884, Rose discovered she was pregnant. The realization came slowly, a missed monthly course followed by morning sickness and a tenderness in her breasts. When she was certain, she waited until Tucker came in from a long day checking on new calves, and she simply said, "We are going to have a baby." Tucker's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. His face cycled through shock, disbelief, and finally pure joy. He picked her up and spun her around laughing, then immediately set her down and apologized, worried he had hurt her. "I am not made of glass," Rose said, laughing at his concern. "I know, but still. You are carrying our child, Rose. That is precious." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Rose continued her work through the summer, slowing down only when her growing belly made certain tasks difficult. The women from neighboring ranches heard the news and came to visit, bringing advice and baby clothes and stories about their own experiences. Rose found herself part of a community she had not known existed, a network of women who supported each other through the challenges of frontier life. Helena made the trip out to the ranch several times, huffing about the difficulty of the journey, but clearly pleased to see Rose so settled and happy. She brought gifts, tiny gowns she had sewn, and a cradle that had belonged to a boarding house guest who had left it in lieu of rent. "You are blooming," Helena told Rose during one visit. "Motherhood agrees with you." "I am terrified," Rose admitted. "What if I do not know what to do? What if something goes wrong?" "Every new mother is terrified. But you are strong, Rose. You will figure it out, same as you have figured out everything else." Helena patted her hand. "And you have Tucker, and you have me. You are not alone." In October, when the cottonwoods along the creek turned gold and the air held the first bite of winter, Rose's labor began. Tucker rode frantically to fetch Doc Harrison, and the older man arrived with his medical bag and an air of calm competence. The labor was long and painful, and there were moments when Rose thought she could not endure another contraction. But Tucker stayed by her side, holding her hand and murmuring encouragement, and Helena arrived in time to help with the final stages. Just after dawn, Rose gave birth to a son. The baby was small but healthy, with a surprisingly loud cry and a thick head of dark hair. When Doc Harrison placed him in her arms, Rose felt a love so fierce and overwhelming it took her breath away. "What should we name him?" Tucker asked, his voice choked with emotion. Rose had been thinking about this for months. "James, after my father, James Dalton." "James," Tucker repeated, testing the name. "I like it. Hello, James. I am your father." The baby's arrival changed everything. Their small house suddenly felt full of life. The silence replaced by crying and cooing and the 100 small sounds of a newborn. Rose was exhausted in ways she had never experienced, her body recovering from birth while her mind tried to adapt to the constant demands of caring for an infant. But there was joy, too, in watching James grow and change. in seeing Tucker's face light up when the baby grasped his finger, in the quiet moments of nursing when it was just Rose and her son in the darkness before dawn. Tucker was a devoted father, helping with James whenever he was not working. He would walk the baby around their small house in the evenings, singing off key songs that somehow always soothed James to sleep. He built a larger cradle with his own hands, sanding it smooth so there would be no splinters. He was patient with Rose's exhaustion and her occasional tears, understanding that she was adjusting to a profound change. As James grew from a baby into a toddler, the Dalton family found their rhythm. Rose managed the household and the garden while caring for their son. Tucker continued his work as foreman, earning the respect of both the ranch hands and Mr. Garrett. They were not rich, but they were comfortable. And more importantly, they were happy. In the summer of 1886, when James was nearly 2, Rose discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was harder. She was constantly tired, and the morning sickness lasted well into the 4th month. Tucker worried over her, and Rose sometimes caught him watching her with concern. "I am fine," she would insist, "just tired." "You need to rest more. Let me hire someone to help with the house." "We cannot afford that." "We can if we need to. Rose, you are not alone in this. Let me help." They compromised by having one of the ranch hands' wives, a young Mexican woman named Maria, come by a few times a week to help with the heavy work. Maria was cheerful and efficient, and she adored James, often taking him outside to play while Rose rested. This baby came earlier than expected on a cold February night in 1887. The birth was faster than James's had been, but more intense, and Rose was grateful when it was over and Doc Harrison placed a daughter in her arms. "Another healthy one," the doctor said approvingly. "You make good babies, Mrs. Dalton." The little girl had Tucker's blue-gray eyes and Rose's delicate features. They named her Clara, after Tucker's mother. James, now a curious toddler, was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to touch her constantly and asking endless questions about why she was so small. With 2 children, life became even busier. Rose's days were a whirlwind of feeding and changing and cleaning and cooking. Some days she fell into bed so exhausted she could barely speak. But she would not have traded it for anything. This was the life she had built, the family she had created with Tucker. It was real and solid and hers. The years passed in a steady progression marked by the seasons and the rhythms of ranch life. James grew into a sturdy boy who followed Tucker everywhere, learning about cattle and horses and the skills needed to survive on the frontier. Clara was quieter, more thoughtful, but she had a stubborn streak that reminded Rose of herself. In 1889, Rose gave birth to another son, whom they named Daniel. In 1891, a third daughter arrived, tiny and fierce, and they called her Margaret. The small house that had once seemed adequate was now bursting at the seams. Tucker and some of the ranch hands built an addition, 2 more rooms that gave the older children their own space. It was chaotic and loud and wonderful, and Rose sometimes marveled at how far she had come from that day in the desert when she thought her life was over. Helena remained a constant presence, visiting regularly and maintaining a correspondence with Rose when visits were not possible. She aged gracefully, her hair going completely white but her spirit remaining sharp. She sold the boarding house in 1892, declaring she was too old for such work, and moved into a small cottage in Shafter that Rose and Tucker helped her buy. "I am retiring," Helena announced. "I have earned it." "What will you do with all your free time?" Rose asked us. "Read, garden, sit on my porch and judge my neighbors, all the things I never had time for before." Helena smiled. "And spend time with my family, of course." Family. The word still made Rose's heart swell. She had lost her family of birth, but she had built a new one, stronger and more precious because it was chosen. In the late summer of 1893, a stranger arrived at the Double R. Tucker came to the house. In the middle of the afternoon, his expression troubled. "Rose, there is someone here to see you. He says he is your brother." Rose froze, a dish towel clutched in her hands. "Thomas?" He did not give a name. He is waiting by the barn. Rose's first instinct was to refuse to see him. Thomas had abandoned her, stolen from their family, disappeared for over a decade without a word. She owed him nothing. But curiosity won out over anger, and she followed Tucker outside. The man standing by the barn was barely recognizable as her brother. He had aged badly, his face lined, and his hair already graying, though he was only in his mid-30s. He was thin, his clothes worn and patched, and there was a defeated air about him that Rose had never seen before. "Hello, Rose," he said quietly to Thomas. Her voice was cold. "I know I do not have the right to be here. I know what I did was unforgivable, but I had to see you, had to try to explain." Thomas glanced at Tucker, who stood protectively close to Rose. "Can we talk? Just for a few minutes?" Rose looked at Tucker, who gave a small nod. "I will be right here," he said, his tone making it clear this was not negotiable. Rose walked a short distance away with Thomas, far enough for privacy but close enough that Tucker could intervene if needed. "Say what you came to say." "I was in trouble, Rose. Bad trouble. I owed money to some dangerous men, and they were going to kill me if I did not pay. I tried to get the money honestly, but I could not. So I started stealing. Little things at first, then bigger things. By the time we got to Texas, I was desperate." Thomas's voice was thick with regret. "Leaving you at that fake station was the hardest thing I have ever done. But I thought if those men came after me, you would be safe if we were not together. You could have told me the truth. You could have given me a choice." "I know, I was a coward." Thomas looked down at his boots. "For what it is worth, I paid off the debt eventually. Took me years, working terrible jobs and living like a dog, but I did it. And I've been trying to find you ever since. It was not easy, following a trail that old." Rose felt her anger warring with the love she had once felt for her brother. He looked so broken, so genuinely remorseful, that it was hard to hold on to her rage. "Why now? What do you want from me?" "Nothing. I just wanted to apologize, to let you know I'm sorry for what I did, and to see that you were all right." Thomas's eyes glistened. "You look good, Rose. Happy. I am glad. I am happy. I have a husband who loves me, 4 children, a home. I built a life without you. You deserved better than what I gave you. I hope someday you can forgive me, but I will understand if you cannot." Thomas started to turn away, then paused. "Our aunt died last year, did you know? She left a small sum to me in her will, and I used part of it to track you down. I have the rest here." He pulled a leather pouch from his coat and held it out. "It is not much, maybe $100, but it is rightfully yours. She should have left it to you instead of me." Rose stared at the pouch, not moving to take it. "I do not want her money. Please let me do this one thing right." Thomas set the pouch on the ground between them. "Goodbye, Rose. I hope you have a good life." He walked away, back to a thin horse tied near the road, and rode off without looking back. Rose stood frozen, watching him disappear into the distance, feeling nothing and everything all at once. Tucker came up behind her and put his arms around her waist. "Are you all right?" "I do not know. Part of me wants to hate him. Part of me just feels sad." Rose leaned back against her husband's solid warmth. "He looks so broken, Tucker. Whatever life he has lived, it has not been kind to him. That does not excuse what he did to you." "I know, but maybe I can forgive him anyway, not for his sake, but for mine, so I can let go of the anger I have been carrying." Tucker kissed the top of her head. "You are a better person than I am." Rose picked up the leather pouch and opened it, finding it full of coins and bills. $100 was a significant sum, enough to buy things they needed for the children, maybe to add to their savings. It felt like Thomas's attempt at restitution, and she decided to accept it in that spirit. That evening, after the children were in bed, Rose told Tucker the whole story of her conversation with Thomas. They sat together on the porch of their house, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Do you regret not going with him?" Tucker asked. "Not trying to help him?" "No. Thomas made his choices, and now he has to live with them. But I hope he finds some peace. You have a kind heart, Rose Dalton. I have a full heart. There is a difference. Rose laced her fingers through Tucker's. Everything that has happened, all the pain and struggle, it led me here to you and our children. If I had to go through it all again to reach this moment, I would. I love you, Tucker said simply. I love you too. Always. The years continued to roll forward, bringing changes and challenges. James grew into a young man who took naturally to ranch work, eventually becoming one of his father's most trusted hands. Clara showed an unexpected talent for numbers and helped Rose manage the household accounts. Daniel was the quiet one, more interested in books than cattle, and Tucker supported his dream of becoming a teacher. Margaret, the baby, was as wild as a prairie wind, always climbing trees and racing horses and giving her parents gray hairs. In 1898, when Rose was 41, she was surprised to discover she was pregnant again. This late baby, a son they named Samuel, was the easiest of all her children, a contented infant who seemed to sense his mother was tired and adjusted accordingly. James was 17 by then, already courting a girl from a neighboring ranch, and Clara was 15, on the cusp of young womanhood. Tucker, now in his early 40s, had been promoted again, becoming the ranch manager when Mr. Garrett's health began to fail. The owner, who had no children of his own, had hinted that when he passed, he intended to leave the R to Tucker, in recognition of his years of loyal service and good stewardship. It seemed too good to be true, but Mr. Garrett was a man of his word. Helena passed away peacefully in her sleep in the winter of 1900 at the age of 72. Rose grieved deeply for the woman who had been more mother to her than employer, who had taken her in when she had nothing and given her a chance to build a life. They buried Helena in the Shafter Cemetery, and Rose made sure the headstone read, "Beloved friend and family." In 1903, Mr. Garrett died, and his will revealed that he had indeed left the R Ranch to Tucker. It was over 1,000 acres of good grazing land, a solid house, barns and outbuildings, and a reputation for quality cattle. Tucker and Rose, now in their mid-40s, found themselves landowners, a status they had never dared to dream of. "We did it," Tucker said, the night they learned of the inheritance, holding Rose close. "We built something real and permanent." "You did it," Rose corrected. "You earned this with your hard work and integrity." "We did it together. I could not have done any of this without you, Rose. You have been my partner in every sense of the word." James married his sweetheart in 1904 and brought his wife, Emily, to live and work on the ranch. Clara married a year later, a young lawyer from Fort Davis, and moved to town. Daniel went east to attend a teaching college, determined to bring education back to frontier communities. Margaret, true to her wild nature, fell in love with a bronco rider and married him in a hurried ceremony that gave Rose heart palpitations. Little Samuel, now 7, was the joy of his parents' later years, reminding them of what it was like to see the world through a child's eyes. The new century brought changes to the region. Shafter grew, adding more businesses and even a proper school. The railroad that had never existed for Rose in 1882 finally came through in 1905, connecting the area to larger markets. Automobiles began to appear on the roads, noisy and unreliable, but representing a future that was rapidly approaching. Through it all, Tucker and Rose remained constant to each other. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, cattle diseases and market fluctuations. They celebrated births and mourned deaths, including Rose's aunt's passing, which she learned of years after the fact. They watched their children grow and have children of their own, filling their lives with grandchildren who called them Nana and Papa. In 1910, on their 28th wedding anniversary, Tucker took Rose back to the place where he had found her all those years ago. The landscape was unchanged, still empty scrubland marked only by sagebrush and the endless sky. "Why did you bring me here?" Rose asked, though she already knew. "Because this is where our story began. You were standing right here waiting for a train that would never come, and I rode up thinking I would help a stranger. I had no idea that stranger would become my whole world. Tucker took both her hands in his. I wanted to come back here and remember that sometimes the worst moments lead to the best things. You thought you were lost that day, but really you were exactly where you were supposed to be. Rose felt tears slip down her cheeks. They were both older now, gray-haired and weathered by sun and time, but the love between them was as strong as ever. I was waiting for nothing, she said softly, but I found everything. They stood together in the place where it all began. Two people who had been broken and lost, but who had found in each other a reason to hope, to trust, to love. The wind swept across the scrubland carrying the scent of sage and dust and possibility, and Rose thought about the girl she had been, abandoned and alone, and the woman she had become, surrounded by family and secure in the knowledge that she was loved. Life was not always easy on the frontier. There were hard seasons and lean years, sorrows that cut deep and challenges that tested their resolve. But standing there with Tucker's arms around her, looking out at the vast Texas landscape that had become their home, Rose knew with absolute certainty that she would not change a single moment of the journey that had brought her to this place, to this man, to this life they had built together. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in the same shades of amber and rust that Rose remembered from that first terrifying evening, Tucker helped her back onto their horse and they rode home together. Two people made one by love and time and the countless small choices that had bound their lives inextricably together. The Double R Ranch continued to thrive under Tucker's management, and in time James took over more of the day-to-day operations, learning from his father the way Tucker had once learned from the old foreman. Rose, now in her 60s, spent her time tending her garden, writing letters to her far-flung children, and spoiling her grandchildren with the same fierce love she had once poured into raising her own babies. In 1920, as the nation celebrated the end of the Great War and entered a new decade of prosperity, Tucker and Rose celebrated their 40th anniversary with a gathering of family and friends. All 5 of their children came home, bringing spouses and children in a joyful, chaotic reunion. The house Tucker had built was filled with laughter and music, and the sounds of life lived fully. Late that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Tucker and Rose sat together on their porch, watching the stars wheel overhead in their eternal dance. 40 years, Rose marveled. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that you found me in the desert. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago. It is a lifetime, our lifetime, lived together. Tucker took her hand, his touch as familiar and comforting as her own heartbeat. I would do it all again, Rose. Every moment, every challenge, every joy. I would choose you 1,000 times over. And I would choose you. Always. They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had grown old together, who had weathered every storm and celebrated every triumph side by side. Rose thought about the girl she had been, terrified and alone, certain that her life was over. She thought about Thomas, wherever he was now, and she hoped he had found some measure of peace. She thought about Helena, buried in the Shafter Cemetery, and silently thanked her for the gift of family and the lesson that love could be chosen as easily as given by blood. Most of all, she thought about the cowboy who had stopped to help a stranger, who had seen her at her lowest point and offered not pity, but partnership. Tucker had given her a home, a family, a life beyond anything she had dared to imagine. In return, she had given him her whole heart, and together they had built something that would last long after they were gone, a legacy of love and hard work and faith in better things. As the night deepened and the chill of the evening settled around them, Tucker stood and helped Rose to her feet. "Come on, Mrs. Dalton, let us go to bed. Tomorrow is another day, and I want to spend every moment of it with you." Rose smiled and let him lead her inside, into the warmth of the home they had created, into the life they had built together from nothing but hope and determination and love. It had been a long journey from that desolate stretch of Texas scrubland to this moment of perfect contentment, but every step had been worth it. The door closed behind them, shutting out the night and sealing in the warmth and light and love that filled the Double R Ranch. Outside, the stars continued their eternal watch over the land, bearing witness to the countless stories played out beneath their gaze, stories of loss and redemption, of heartbreak and healing, of two souls finding each other in the wilderness and choosing again and again to build a life together. Rose and Tucker's story was one of many in the vast tapestry of the American West, but it was theirs, unique and precious and true. From the moment he found her waiting for a train that would never come, to this night 40 years later when they walked hand in hand into the house they had made a home, their love had been the constant, the foundation upon which everything else was built. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything.